Hi, welcome back to Midpointe. This is a place where we can share encouragement from this last week's sermon at Crosspoint Church. If you weren't able to join us, the sermon is online. Just follow the link in this video description and you can watch it for yourself. This week we went over the verses in Matthew that tell us about Jesus being arrested, his disciples fleeing, and then Jesus being put on trial. Those of you who go to Crosspoint probably noticed that during the sermon, I sit in the back in the sound booth so I can do the slides for the sermon. And Jacob, my friend, sits right next to me. And during the sermon, he leaned over to me and said, Jesus being arrested is a lot like Daniel in the Old Testament. And I thought about it, and we talked about it after the sermon as well. And that's what I want to share with you today. Pastor Garrett pointed out that the reason the Pharisees and the other religious leaders wanted to arrest Jesus was because they were jealous of him and they wanted to do things their own way. Jesus was just getting in the way of what they wanted. And in Daniel, something very similar happened. Daniel 6 verses 3 through 4 say, "Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him." Sounds like another guy, right? Jesus. This mirrors what the Pharisees did. They were trying to find fault with him, because if they could officially say, oh, he's doing wrong, he's blasphemed against God, then they could get rid of him. An interesting thing, Daniel was arrested because he was praying. That's what the other officials did. They created this decree and got the king to sign off on it, that if anyone prays to anyone, anything except the king for this certain amount of time, then they'll be thrown in the lion's den. And Daniel still prayed. So they arrested him for praying. And what was Jesus doing right before they arrested him? He was in the garden praying. It's very interesting. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but it showed that they both valued prayer, especially in difficult times. And Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, but of course, he came out unscathed. Sort of like coming back from the dead, which Jesus literally did that. There are many, many examples in the Old Testament of things pointing to Christ. Shadows, if you will, of the real guy, Jesus. So as he's getting closer to the cross, he's wrapping up all these shadows, these images of him, all the prophecies. They're all being fulfilled, especially on the cross. Even the things he says, the very things that the people do around him, it was like all prophecy. Dividing up his clothes, stabbing him. It's full. I mentioned that I talked to Jake about the sermon, and we've been doing that for the past few months, getting together and discussing the sermon afterwards. And a lot of what I put here on these Midpoint videos come from those conversations. So I encourage you to talk to somebody about the sermon. As we share with each other, new things come up that we didn't think about. I hadn't thought that Daniel was like Jesus until he mentioned it. So I encourage you, continue the conversation after the sermon. That's what these midpoints are for, to encourage you to do that. Jacob has actually written a poem that I want to share with you that talks about how there's many examples, images in the Old Testament that all point to Christ. So we're going to end the midpoint with that. It's called All That Is Written. He is Moses leading his people out. He is Joshua marching them in. He is Elijah healing for those far off. He is Gideon, his light in a jar of clay. He is Daniel, arrested in prayer. He is Isaac, the true child of promise. He is Joseph, falsely accused, between two thieves lifted up. He is Jacob, as he toils, as he sings for his bride. He is David, waiting for a kingdom. He is Solomon, building the temple of our God. He is Adam and Abraham, the first of all things new. He is the angel. He is the seed. He is the stone struck, the tree bared, the bush unburned. He is the stream and the manna. He is the cloud. He is the fire. He is all the prophets of the Lord. He drinks the cup filled to the brim. He is life spilling over. That's some epic stuff. All this buildup for Jesus to come to save you from your sins. If there's such an epic buildup to your new life, you best believe that this life is going to be just as epic or even more epic. It makes me think that we're in a movie trilogy. Creation to Jesus dying, that's episode 1. We're in episode 2 now, the church age. And then episode 3 will start with Jesus coming back and taking us to live forever in heaven. Each episode is epic. We sort of forget or don't give episode 2 enough credit. We're like, oh yeah, what Jesus did before was great. What he's gonna do is great. I'm just here in between, just waiting to go home. Sure, we do have longing to go home. But God said, Jesus said, I came to give you life and life to the full, life more abundantly. So are we looking to Jesus? He's the one that helps us through this life, the author and finisher of our faith. We should look to him. The Bible literally says to do that. Epic, epic, epic. Was there something else in the sermon that you found? Because I want to be pumped up by you. So if you want to leave a comment, sharing that, could be really short. Could be, I was encouraged by this verse. I was encouraged because I was reminded that Jesus went through a lot for me. Please share. Share it either in the comments, share it with somebody else. Maybe share this video with somebody. Could do that. Anyway, thanks for joining us here at Midpointe. Hopefully you can join us this Sunday, 10:30 a.m. for our next service as we continue to go through the book of Matthew. Until then, God bless.